in from 20 odd degree Fahrenheit weather. It's our first guest for 2022. Ryan Hager, welcome to our show. How are you, mate?
I'm doing great. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, it's an honor for us to have you. First guest of the new year, and you up and at it already. I mean, we got frigid weather all over the US, and you're out there teaching golf right now.
I sure am. Yeah, there's a lull between the holidays, but it ramps right back up after New Year's. A lot of resolutions, lessons, things like that, I guess. And we have a nice little indoor setup, so I've got somewhere to do hitting into a simulator net with TrackMan, and actually I find you can do a lot of really good work indoors that sometimes you can't quite accomplish outside. So
all right,
starting to get busy.
Folks, if you haven't found him on social media just yet, I did a little while back, and I've been following along feverishly, watching some of the content you're putting out there. And so I reached out to you, and I'm like, I need stuff that the folks in the cold can do to prepare their game for the spring. But before we get there, please tell us a little bit about you. I know you've just been nominated as the Golf Digest top 40 instructor, or top instructor under 40. So congratulations on that. But give us the backstory, please.
Thank you. Yeah. So I grew up in Rochester, New York, home of a lot of really good golf, like Oak Hill. A lot of major championships have been hosted there. Great golfing population, sort of a short season because of the cold, but got hooked on golf as a high schooler. I ended up going to Penn State to do the PGA golf management program, and got spit out of there as an assistant golf pro, kind of figuring out what I liked in this industry. As I was leaving school, I ended up doing an internship on campus in a really cool facility called the Golf Teaching and Research Center. And it's a biomechanics lab where I learned a lot of sort of technical, anatomical stuff about the golf swing, ground forces, and things like that. I thought it was really cool. It was the thing that I was the most interested at the time. So I started trying to tailor my career and get it headed in more of an instruction sort of route. And that's what more or less.
When you were playing, were you interested in the teaching and instruction side of the thing? Were you one of those golfers who was sort of the technique guy over the playing guy?
No, not really. Actually, probably the opposite. I grew up a hockey player. Golf was like something to do in the summertime where I probably wouldn't get hurt and miss any of hockey season. So I was playing it for fun. I was on the high school team and kind of got it quick, but I never took a lesson until that internship in that sort of biomechanics room. So I had never really, I always thought I'm too good for a lesson. What do I need that for? I've gotten this far on my own type of thing. And then after taking a lesson or two, I started to just think how interesting it was to fit pieces together and change the movement to make the ball go somewhere different or do something different or go faster or what have you. So right after college is when I would say the passion for the industry, the game, and specifically teaching kind of started. So no, not really. I found it late, like after college.
You know what? If nothing else, you've given hope to a number of late starters in the game, I'm sure, because nowadays everyone's
hard to say I'm a late starter. I'm 27, so well, I mean, it's not that late. But
yeah, but you were a hockey player, athlete, obviously. Playing some golf in high school. But you're a high school golfer, but all of a sudden now one of the leading instructors in the game, and so I guess it speaks to decent understanding and a passion for something. And if you really dive into it, you can achieve whatever you want.
I'm certainly a believer in that. Yeah. I think enjoying and being interested in, whatever it is you're doing certainly fuels the drive to keep doing it. And I really love teaching now. It's I think the most rewarding part of being a golf pro, because you are sort of helping a frustrated person who's there because they're not enjoying golf enough find the thing that's going to make them enjoy it more. And I think that that's alone something that's very, has a lot of, helps me stay passionate for it.
All right. Now you're all bundled up because you've been out there giving lessons in the cold in the Northeast. But I am led to believe that you spend a little time down in Florida learning from a really
Yes.
good friend of mine in Jim McLean. So share
Yes,
that
sir.
part of the story.
Yeah, that's a good story. So when I was fresh out of school, I was actually working as an assistant where I am right now, which is Plainfield Country Club. That's where I'm the
Love that
director.
place up there for
Oh,
the BMW
awesome.
a ways back, I think it was.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm now the director of instruction here. When I was an assistant, there was a teaching pro here, also the director of instruction at the time, named Joe Compatello. And I clung to him at the hip, thinking if I can learn from this guy, maybe I can become a better instructor and teach more lessons. So he got me connected with the Jim McLean School for my first seasonal winter job.
Okay.
And he had worked for Jim for a number of years, was a full-time instructor there in the wintertime. And he connected me to Grayson Zacher, who sort of mans the helm down there as the director of instruction. And I got a job. I was an assistant going to work. I think the agreement was 4 days a week. You get 3 days off. I'm like, this sounds like a vacation. This is going to be great. Yeah. And I'm driving down 95, and I'm supposed to be one of 6 or 7 assistants. We all kind of do the same thing. You prep the range, park the carts, clean the carts, whatever. And I'm driving down 95. I've never been to Miami before. I've never met Jim in person before. I'm just excited to get the winter going. And I get a call from Joe, who he says, hey, Jim's personal teaching assistant has been essentially promoted, but he is moving on to become an instructor at the school. His name's Tyler Slocum. He's actually a close friend of mine. And Jim now needs a new assistant. Would you want to be Jim's assistant? Okay. And I had no idea what that even really meant, other than I get to spend more time with Jim. So I said yes. And he goes, okay, let me get back to you. So he calls me back. A couple of minutes later, he's like, okay, you got the job. So awesome. I said, oh, awesome, great. I can't wait for that. So I drive down there having no idea what I had just gotten myself into. And I went to work sometime in early November, and I will never forget, I worked 64 days in a row with no days off, because Jim also worked 64 days in a row. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all of them. And I was exhausted. But I tell you what, that was like drinking from a fire hose. I've never learned more in a short, I guess you could call 6 months a short period of time. I mean, it was like the best educational, I called it grad school for me. It was about the best thing that's ever happened to me career-wise.
You know what? I've got so much respect for him. I think he's a tremendous mind. He's been on the show before. And if, a Mount Rushmore of golf instructors is one, I don't like that, but there would only be 4 people. But, if there was like an all-time class of golf instructors, I would argue that Jim McLean would be one of the top 10, certainly, if not better than that.
I agree. I think it's easy to look at the tour players that he's worked with, the books he's written, the videos, all these things that he's given back to golfers directly. But I think the number one thing that sets Jim apart is his ability to train other teachers to become really great teachers. And the alumni, if you will, from the Jim McLean sort of stable, is really impressive. It's, one, it's massive. 2, it's fairly global. Like, there's Jim McLean and certified and master and lead master instructors all over the world, and they're all really good at, I think, getting golfers better at golf.
Well, I love the way.
Huge thing.
Yeah, I've gotten to know Karen Palacios Jansen very well, and she worked with us for David Ledbetter for a bit, and then she moved down to Miami and worked with Jim McLean for a long while. And I love the information and the simplicity of approach. You know, the communication to me is just so clean always. And it's the one thing now pivoting to you, because you clearly have used the experience of yours, and now you're making it your own, from what I've seen, and the communication in terms of the images you're putting out. It's just really easy to comprehend and to grasp, and then more importantly to me, to understand and then take and turn into in someone's improved game. So let's dive in, shall we? I said to you, look, it's winter time for a lot of folks who listen to this, not the people in the southern hemisphere, but they'll go into winter and they'll need to get their games back in shape
Yeah.
for when golf time rolls around. And you're doing it with folks right now. So I said to you, hey, how about 5 ideas, 5 drills, 5 tips, 5 things you might be able to do inside, whatever the case might be, just to kind of kick off and prepare for the new season. And so you sent me 5 quick videos. I'm
Yep.
going to send folks to your Instagram handle to go and check them out. But let's describe them. Let's start with the first one. And I'm making this number one because if I throw out the term early extension, or if I just type that in Google, you find thousands of videos
Oh, yeah.
about early extension. Yet yours was just so easy to understand. So talk about the problem and then how you can drill to fix it.
Sure. So the early extension, for those listening that might not know exactly what that is, it is something you can identify on video, generally filming down the target line, where before contact with the ball, the pelvis moves in towards the golf ball, and generally the head and chest move up and away from the golf ball. Loss of posture, standing up are two common
And your
other
buddy
names.
says to you, yo, Joe, you lifting your head likely, right?
Yes, right.
Okay. Hey, I
And
went
then
back
that
to-
guy just tries to bury his chin in his chest and keep his head down. He
ends
keeps
up-
humping the golf ball and it doesn't get any better.
It ends up doing what I've done to myself here over years and years of golf teaching, is herniating a disc in my neck, but that's been for
Yeah, no thanks.
Hey, help us here. You talked about camera down the line, and everyone's got a phone. You can video your swing. Where, in relation to the body down the line, do folks need to lodge this camera so they can get the best perspective of their target line view of the golf swing?
That's a great question. I would argue there's 2 answers to this. As a past, assistant of Jim McLean, I think through his system, he films on the target line. But the thing with filming on the target line, meaning the camera, the golf ball, and the eventual target are in a perfectly straight line. The camera about chest or middle of the rib cage high.
All right, gotcha.
The thing about that is you need to be far enough away from the ball for it not to distort the way that the swing looks.
Okay.
So if you have ample space behind you and some kind of, the way iPhones are made now, you can zoom in and it's clear as can be. That works great. You need to film that way every single time, or else your swing is going to look different every single time.
You preaching there, because it's fascinating. I spend, because when I'm not broadcasting, I'm sort of chilling, and I float around on social media to look at stuff, and it's amazing how then you'll get one person who's like, well, compare Colin Morikawa now.
Oh gosh, yeah, blows my
I'm
mind.
like, well, first off, you got different frames over here, so you can't tell me there's a difference, but the cameras are at different angles too.
Yeah,
you just get a rubbish perspective of stuff.
Yeah, you sure do. And a lot of that is because I don't think people know that the camera angle makes it look different. At least amateur golfers, maybe pros do, and they're just being lazy. But I think, that's probably the most neglected thing when it comes to video analysis, is where the camera is.
So your second, you talked about down the target line, sort of
Yes,
tight down the target line, over the ball, over the club, target directly down the ball.
yes, about 30 feet back. If you can get 30 feet, that's far enough.
And then
if you don't have 30
down
feet,
your foot line, or what are you looking at there?
Yeah, the toe line or the hand line. I'll put it to you this way: the closer the camera has to be to the golfer, let's say you're indoors and there's a wall, 10 feet behind you, and you can't put it any farther away, the closer it should be to lined up with the hands parallel inside of the golf ball, between the ball and the toes. So the farther back you are, the closer to the ball line you can be. The closer you are, the closer to the toes.
Gotcha.
The camera should be. I think that's a decent rule of thumb.
Hey, if we stopped everything right now, that would be enough for folks to go and bite on it and at least do them some favors, because they're indoors a lot of the time and hitting into simulators and stuff. All right, so I waylaid you, but we're back on track now.
That's all right. Here we go.
So the early extension, you've described it. It's the loss of shape in the pelvis. The chest lifts up to the sky. Hands get high. Excess hand action. Blah 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 blah. Right. What's the drill?
So the drill, and I like to give credit. So this drill I learned from Adam Koloff.
Right.
He's a phenomenal instructor. Just won Teacher of the Year in Massachusetts, and
been on the show, incidentally. Right?
On the show, also a Jim McLean guy. Go figure. It's called the dynamic posture drill, and the thinking here, and the thinking with a lot of my instruction, is if you are doing something wrong, the solution is hidden in the opposite. So if you are standing out of your posture, then you need to do something where you are now essentially bending over in the downswing. I suppose that's the best way I can come up with saying it right now. So the way the drill works is you'll address the ball normally, just to make sure that your stance and ball position are in the proper place that they're usually in. But then you stand fully erect. You're going to stand straight up and down. Your knees are straight. Your pelvis is essentially flat. Your spine is straight up in the air.
All right.
And the club is being held out in front of you. You'll sometimes see people
chest high, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Your hands will be around chest high. The shaft of the club might be pointing up at the sky.
Okay.
So you are now as stood up as you can possibly be. And the way the drill works is you now have to start your swing from that position and achieve enough tilt towards the ball in the middle of the swing, whether it's the backswing or the downswing. I suppose ideally a lot of the tilting would happen in transition, because that's where a lot of the standing up happens for people. But you are going to start standing up, and you have to bend over enough that you can make contact with the ball. If you don't bend over enough, you'll likely whiff or top it. And if you can start to reprogram your brain to start your downswing with tilting towards the ball instead of tilting away from the ball, I think that's a good way to train your brain to tell your body what to do and improve essentially your dynamic posture while you swing.
Yeah, and you're reversing the kinetics of it too. I want to sort of make this the advanced version of the exercise and then the slightly downscaled version. Advanced would be hitting a golf ball, and I can expect this will be hard because you don't have the trigger of the backswing and such. So if
I would argue advanced would be swinging a club. You should be doing this with your arms across your chest and try to, or maybe the club held across your shoulders, with your arms crisscrossed, and get the shaft to be flat going back and tilted down in transition.
Folks, you need to watch this on YouTube for the folks listening on audio.
Yeah.
He's just done a beautiful example of the shoulder tilt.
I'll try to do that a little differently here. So you are seeing this.
So now he's got the arms across his chest, level turn, and then turns down into spine. Hey, but I'm saying if you can hit a ball, that's highly advanced.
Highly advanced.
If you got a club in your hand and you make this move to moving into dynamic posture through the contact zone, just bottoming the club out somewhere in the grass in the right place, that's sufficient, wouldn't you say?
Certainly. Yeah. Taking a divot, period. I wouldn't put a lot of stock in even where the divot shows up. It's finding the ground after being so far away from it.
That's awesome. And again, like you can do this without a golf club, just arms across the chest, and you could stand straight up and go into your forward spine tilt. Right. So we've hit the ground running here with early extension going away. Then there was one that caught my attention. Now, I'll be honest, I've looked at a lot of your stuff, but I was not familiar with a Shin Breaker. So you need to explain to me and the folks listening, please.
Yeah. Again, credit. I got this from someone I used to work with when I was at Baltusrol named Jason Carbone, top 50 instructor in the country, I believe, by Golf Magazine. And he actually, I think he sent me this from a different coach showing it on his Instagram, but he thought I would like it, so he sent it. Anyways, yeah, this one's also probably good to start out with because it somewhat has to do with early extension as well. The great drill, if you kind of have an overly active trail foot, specifically the knee and heel of the trail leg driving out towards the golf ball.
Here's an opinion question. All right. And I'll let you go there with it because you get my mind going, and a lot of folks are now going to hit me up on Twitter going, you always interrupt people. But yeah, I'm listening. You know, in the era of ground reaction forces, I'm watching golfers, and I don't know if you see the same thing. They're bouncing around the place like they are on a trampoline, and they can't put the club down consistently in the ground at all. Whereas one of the finest ball strikers I've ever seen, I've known him since he was 13, Ernie Els, he played his best golf when he did, at least, or when he hit the ball the best. He'd say to me, he tried to keep his right heel, his trail heel, grounded for as long as he could in his downswing. And I tried it, and I flushed every single time when I did that. Was that
this is a drill Ernie Els would excel at in that case. Yeah. It's also not as much about planted. It's more so like how the knee and ankle and right hip are moving relative to the ball. It's not, you know, I am in agreement. I think a lot of times, like if you have quieter footwork, it can oftentimes help you with just consistent, solid contact. You might not hit it as far as Kyle Berkshire, but you'll find the middle of the face. And I think this drill goes kind of along with that. So for that person who's sort of right leg drives out at the ball too much, like really vertical jumping. It might not look a ton like early extension, but you know, the right side of your body gets out towards the ball too much. So what you do is you find a range basket and you flip it on its side and you put your foot sort of halfway into it. So you'd be standing where the arch in your foot is right on the edge of the basket.
Okay. So the range, so
you're almost wearing the basket like a shoe. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So the basket is looking at you. You've slipped your foot into the wide end, and you got the rim of it sort of underneath the arch of your foot.
Yes. The
folks can find us on your social media too, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It's probably one of my 20 most recent videos.
All right.
So that would be the setup. The top rim of the basket then would be somewhere in line with the middle of your shin, give or take. And it is called the Shin Breaker because if you use your typical sort of excessive knee and hip drive towards the ball, you are going to ram your shin right into the basket. So there's really good negative feedback on this drill. If you do it incorrectly, it's not going to feel very good.
So a lot of this is like you talk about the Shin Breaker to me, and you were describing the action and how the trail side would fire up and out and close the gap on the golf ball. There's a lot of spatial relation and understanding here to say, okay, this is kind of where the bottom part of my right leg is operating as I'm pivoting back down and through the golf ball.
Absolutely. And that's sort of why I was saying, like, it's not even just that the foot stays planted. It's actually, if you can see this, take my shoe off.
Yeah.
So rather than the foot going like this at the ball, it should start to bank and go that way more.
So you
before it goes out. So the foot is going to tilt and then go forwards as opposed to just driving forwards. More banking kind of in that direction. So the knee would go forward. Everything would start to rotate rather than move out of the ball.
And a lot of folks that tend to sort of spin on their back foot a bunch too when they're doing this, and when they're operating properly in that trail foot, they'll probably feel their body's mass start to work forward into
Yes,
that forward leg as they move through it, right?
absolutely.
Cool. I like it, the Shin Breaker. All right, folks, if you're unsure, go check out Ryan Hager PGA. I think is the handle on social media.
That's me.
Right, the Shin Breaker, the box drill. Man, I've used this thing since Moby Dick was a minnow. I still use it. It is the best, and
Yeah.
I don't know who I learned it from. And we had Bob Ford on the show, and he talked about this, how he used it. He uses a 2x4 wooden plank. So if you hit it, you knowing about it. You use a
Yes.
golf club box. What I've done, just sharing information here. I keep one with me all the time, and
All
the
the time.
golf club box. It's it's the cardboard material, and it can get kind of ruined when it's wet. So I wrap it with a few layers of electrical tape, so it keeps
There
the
you go.
thing waterproof. But this
That's a
thing
good
goes
call.
everywhere. All right, talk about
When
your
you work at a country club, we order clubs all the time. So I've got an endless supply of cardboard boxes. So I'm not going to go to all that work, but I appreciate, I
right,
like
talk
the
how to
idea.
use it. Tell us how to use it.
I would say it's multifunctional. The video I sent you is one of my favorites. If your club path is either excessively inside out or excessively outside in, and it's pretty simple. Again, I would say if you can kind of set up to the ball normally to figure out exactly how far from the ball to put the box. If the box is like a driver box is bigger than a lob wedge box. So
yeah,
sometimes depends on what you're using, but the box will go somewhere between your feet and the ball, and equal parts of the box lengthwise will be right and left of the ball as you are looking at it as the golfer.
and this box is sitting parallel with your ball and target line.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the idea here is that the raised edges of the box you will crash into them if your club is swinging off plane, right? If it's too far away from neutral, and you're swinging, let's say, excessively inside out, you would likely hit the box before you hit the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And if the opposite is happening and you struggle with steep sort of over the top swing path, it's very likely you will hit the box just after contact with the ball. And so to get through there unscathed, you've got to basically swing the club on a fairly neutral path, neutral swing direction, in order to make decent contact.
A couple things about this drill, and I want you to put a bow on it after I've mentioned them. The first off is, again, you can do this inside without a golf ball, and that's number one. And you don't have to hit shots because it's just a measure of the pitch of your golf club. And then it gives you some real directional inclination too, because, when you stand to the side of that golf ball and the target's out there in the distance somewhere, people get all discombobulated. But when you've got
Absolutely.
that thing down in front of you, it gets you a sense to say, okay, this is sort of the lines that I'm moving on over here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the further from the driver
Yeah.
and a lob wedge, your perception of where straight is probably the most distorted. And I think that's absolutely a benefit, is alignment and sort of a sense of where the club needs to swing in order to be in the right space at the right time. That's a massive benefit. I've seen Gary Woodland doing this a lot over the last 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
in his time with Butch. And now I believe he's with Mark Blackburn.
Yes.
I've seen him almost on a weekly basis practicing this just to probably keep things neutral and strike it solid.
If we're leveling up, because when you set this one up, the ball's sort of equidistant between the golf ball and the toes, sort of between you, parallel with where you're going. If we're leveling up, you can ease it a little closer to the golf ball, so it starts to give you an idea as to where the heel of the club needs to perform a bit too. How much do you push people along there?
Yeah, it's very different from one person to the next. Skill level matters a lot. Also, I think the ability of a golfer to perform a golf swing differently matters a lot.
That is true.
I work with a lot of people that are very coachable, and you tell them to do something, and in 3 weeks they have overdone it because they are good at changing their motion and learning it. And then other people, no matter how much they practice, their swing looks the same because they're not very good at being different. I don't know exactly what you call that, but I tell people you need to be better at being different. And
it's because this is the talking point. Because a
yeah,
lot of folks, I'm sure they hear this and like, I resemble that remark. It's so much of a mindset adjustment, and then getting used to being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And
yes,
you know, we've all got to a place with our golf game where it's sort of like if it was a baseball analogy, we're on first base, and now we're trying to edge to steal second, but we don't really want to leave first because we've had some success.
yes,
The folks that really get it are the folks that are prepared to sort of go outside their comfort zone, don't you think?
yeah. I've heard some coaches say you have to embrace the suck. You know, like your chances are the first couple attempts, it's so new that you're going to hit a bad shot. You might lay the sod over it. You could shank it. You could top it. There's all sorts of bad things that could happen because it's not part of what you're comfortable with yet. And you have to embrace the suffering period of learning a new skill until you come out the other side. And the long-term development of that trumps short-term gain every time. Like throwing a Band-Aid on some golfer who comes to me in July and isn't going to practice or take another lesson all year, but they just shanked it a lot the round before, needs a Band-Aid. And I know they're not going to try very hard or do very much, but then especially people this time of year who are looking to make a swing change, I make it very clear to them that there's going to probably be a period here where it's a struggle, and that's okay. And you need to basically sign a waiver saying, I am okay with having some hard times. And that's where people find the most benefit down the road.
And even the greats suffer. I mean, Tiger Woods has undergone swing
Oh,
change.
gosh, yeah.
And it doesn't settle overnight.
100%.
But great stuff so far. Two more, and I'm sure there are folks waiting for you. You're so popular.
Great.
The pelvis sway. I mean, this is one of those things. You know, I call it grill room golf tips or Advil for the golf swing, and those include keep your head down, swing slower, keep your left arm straight. You've heard the stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
And don't sway. You must turn. And golfers really don't understand, a lot of them at least, you know, how much side to side lateral there is in the swing, how much rotation there isn't, and how much up and down is going on too. And you've got a drill there to sort of mitigate and neutralize some of the swaying of the pelvis. So please share that.
Yeah. So this drill, I think, is helpful for folks because, you know, to your point that you were just saying, I think it's very easy to confuse the feeling of swaying and the feeling of turning your pelvis. I think a lot of times in a lesson, I will get in there, I will grab someone's pelvis and I go, what does that feel like? And they go, it feels the same. And I say, what? Because I think, the lateral motion of the pelvis away from the target and rotating the pelvis away from the ball can feel the same. So people struggle with that because they can't discern, you know, what's different about them. This drill is good because it helps you visualize and feel that, or at least give you feedback when it's not done correctly. So a much easier drill to do if you're hitting on grass. There's ways to rig this up without, but you take an alignment rod and you're going to stab it in the ground at about a 45-degree angle relative to the ground, and it should be somewhat pointed towards the target.
Okay.
Again, kind of parallel to your target line on a 45-degree angle from the ground towards the belt on your pants.
All right. Okay.
You then will sort of shuffle in there next to it, take your setup, figure out where the golf ball goes. Again, another one, maybe you don't even do it with a ball. You're just going to set up where the stick is very lightly touching, or maybe you have a centimeter of space between the end of the stick and your belt or whatever part of your leg the stick is closest to.
The trail leg. I mean, somewhere
Trail
around
leg, yes.
the trail leg. So you've set this up at an angle, so it's kind of bracing you a little bit, and it's up to your belt. Maybe if you're shorter, or if you're a taller guy, maybe somewhere around the hip bone, or
Yeah, the pocket on your pants, something like that.
So again, it's a reference. It's a little space
Yes.
to say, yo, not much farther than this.
Right.
Back.
It shouldn't, within reason, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like you were just saying, if it's slightly above the belt, below the belt, as long as it's sort of along the seam of the pants, and above, maybe midway up your quad. That's about where the end of the stick should be, pretty close to. Yeah. And it should, like I said, it should either be like so gently touching you, shouldn't be pushing into it, or you should have maybe a centimeter of space between the stick and your leg.
All right.
So that would be the setup. For a righty, it's just to your right. You then swing with the intent of either one, not touching it, or two, moving away from it. And the
target is toward the target is away, not bumping into it going back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And generally, to accomplish this, you have to rotate your pelvis more and laterally slide it or sway it less. If you do nothing but sway, you're going to run into the stick pretty hard. Again, a lot of these involve pain. I'm realizing not very good, but it points it out right away. If you do it incorrectly, you sway, you essentially are stabbing yourself with the stick. And if done correctly, you should stay a similar distance from it for most of the backswing until things start going forwards. And if you exaggerate it, you should almost be rotating your pelvis and moving your tailbone towards the target almost. That is, again, the opposite of the problem, is generally a good fix for the problem. So if you start to get almost like your pelvis moving forwards earlier during the drill, I think that can be a nice way to help you feel the solution to sway. But it's good feedback drill. Again, with or without a golf ball, it matters, but it doesn't matter that much as long as you're accomplishing the point of the drill.
I love this exercise, various reasons. Number one, that pelvis rotation you discuss. A lot of folks are so afraid of reverse pivoting, so they move off too far to their trail side. So they learn to shift pressure between their feet and in their feet. And then Gary Player said to me, he's a mentor, I'm lucky. And he said he got one lesson from Ben Hogan. And Hogan took a club and lodged it down his right leg. And he said, you see this club? You should never, ever hit that throughout your backswing with your body. So you wind up, you turn inside of that thing, and on the way down, you're moving away from it as you're rotating. Great way to compress iron shots.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome for low point.
Yeah.
I think it's just a good athletic motion too. And I'm not here to tell you that you can't sway and be a good golfer. I think, disclaimer, this is more for a person who is swaying and hitting it terrible.
Yeah, exactly right.
I think if you're swaying and you're striping it, just keep swaying. It's okay. Like there's no rule that says you can't do that. But I think like if you struggle with hitting the ball, hitting the ground way before the ball, high dynamic loft, there's a number of things that this could sort of cause later on in the swing. And if you can take this piece out, those pieces also can improve more easily.
I'm glad you said what you did, Ryan. And it, again, for me, exhibits the wise, not just the smart instructor that you are, it exhibits your wisdom, because you talk about, Colin Montgomery, to me, is one of the greatest iron hitters I think I've ever seen. And he had a lot of drift back and forth, but there were other things that were happening in his swing that allowed him to do that, and they would cover up for each other. So you're right. If you're hitting it good, do your thing, as long as it's consistent. All right, we've got 4 down, early extension, shin breaker, the box drill, the pelvis sway drill. Now, here's a biggie. Again, if we want to go and Google, the release, and everyone's debating the release and stuff on social media and trying to sound smarter than everyone else, you've got a really simple exercise to help you with that, that casting, that fishing, that early release of the wrists and such on the way down.
Yes. This is one of the very few drills I have actually thought of on my own. Most, like I said, I like to credit people. Most of these things I've learned from somebody else, another much better teacher than I am. But this one, I feel like I didn't learn from anybody. So that's my claim to fame. Right. I call it the finish line drill. I'm sure you've seen other people do this. Other people apparently have thought of this too. But you need an alignment rod again. Also, if you are indoors, it might be slightly challenging to get the rod sort of propped up correctly. But if you're outdoors in grass, super easy. Just stick it in the ground at a perfect 90-degree angle. It should be coming directly straight up out of the ground, not bent in any direction.
So it's a reference. It's a visual reference for one that's up in front of you.
Correct. Okay. The stick is the finish line. And at the bottom of the stick, maybe 2 or 3 inches just inside the stick, that's where the ball is going to go. Mm-hmm. And then you would address the ball so that if a camera was looking face on at you, the stick would be cutting straight through the middle of the golf ball. So the stick goes kind of on the ball position line, straight up and down and just outside of the ball. This is a kind of a nice non-technical, easy to visualize drill for creating more shaft lean or lower dynamic loft at impact, both of which are huge for consistency with compression and contact with irons. Yeah. And very simply, the cue I give people is you want your hands to win the race to the finish line, and it's racing against the club head. Yes. So generally people that struggle with launching the ball high, they don't hit it very far, they hit behind the ball, all kinds of things related to poor
toes, your toe shot, you can do it all from
there. Exactly. That person, typically either the race is a tie or the club head gets to the ball first. Mm-hmm. And it gives you mostly low point control and low ball speed, even when you hit it solid. So it's good visual.
Video, Ryan, you are swinging down, and there are 2 things that I think might get lost when folks are just watching this, because everyone's like, oh, I've got to get the handle of the club there before the club head. But what I love that you do is you swing down and you park the club head right next to the ball. The face is looking at the target, so your wrists have moved like they should. You squared the face, and you're just swinging down there, and it's kind of like an isometric thing, where it's not like you are swinging through that full speed. You're coming down at a clip that allows you to feel, the journeys traveled and the speeds at which elements are moving.
Yes, and I think that is a really good point, because I've used this drill a lot. Yeah. And I now describe it to people and I tell them, look, if you try to do this, there's a very good chance that this first shot goes to the right very significantly if you try to hit it as hard as you can.
Savings on that. Yeah, I'd bet my life savings on that.
Exactly. Because when people try to get the butt end in front of the ball, they rotate their forearms in a way that makes that way easier. They essentially cheat the drill. And now the face is both wide open and the hosel is leading into the ball. Yeah. So to your point, when you do this very slowly, if you do that in slow motion and you arrived at the ball, that person would be completely distraught as like, he wants me to do this. The face is so open. Exactly. But a simple change in like wrist angles and the face squares up and now it's de-lofted. And that's the way Dustin Johnson hits the ball. Mm-hmm. And I think if we all had just a little bit of that, most people would hit it more solidly. So that slowness, the thoughtfulness, the awareness you need as you're performing that slow swing is majorly key to then putting it into motion and hitting the ball and squaring up the face and doing the other things that the drill is there for.
Yeah. And you know what, in the time now where all the Northern Hemisphere folk who are listening to this are not indoors really, but you're not outdoors playing much golf. when you're relearning a motor pattern, if you're talking about getting that club down there with a handle leading, but you've essentially, I believe, you've rotated your forearm enough so that the face is squared up and that the lead wrist is raised, and you're in a real powerful striking position. That's a new physical pattern entirely. So it teaches a lot of folks sort of the physical awareness when they're doing this, because if you just do that a few times and you keep your eyes closed and you're feeling the thing, that move, don't you think, is settling? So when they go and hit shots, some of that is going to just sort of, stick a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's extremely hard, I think, to do something that's that brand new. So yeah, like piecing it all together, going slowly, experiencing each and every little piece of it at first is part of learning. And then you slowly kind of chip away at the things that are easy, and you just kind of start doing those more easily. And then the more difficult things, you keep doing them slow until they become easier. And then you can start to put speed back into the system and, improve, but go full speed. That's just the process of learning a skill.
This is great stuff. And I'll tell you why all of these 5 exercises I want folks to pay attention to as well, because as I look through them, and I'm sure you had this planned, the first one, you talk about early extension, but that's going to teach you spine tilt and shoulder tilt as well. The Shin Breaker is touching you in your legs and your feet. The box drill, that's helping you with swing shape and sort of spatial awareness and swing direction. The pelvis sway is your core, your torso, and how it's moving. And then this is wrist. So you've hit us with basically the entire body in 5 tips that folks can do and prepare themselves for some warm weather golf.
It's almost like that was on purpose.
Well done. That's great stuff. Along these lines, I want you just to put a bow on this and say, okay, the weather's crappy, likely. You're not going to get out there that much. Talk to us about time. And if you're just investing your time appropriately, it really doesn't take that much to learn this stuff, does it?
No, I don't think it does. I think rehearsals in your living room can help you learn a lot of this much faster, for sure. I don't want to go completely off the rails here, but I was listening to a podcast. Joe Rogan's podcast recently had a doctor, I'm forgetting his name, and they spoke about the importance of sleep. This guy is like a neuro specialist who has researched, he's like the leading researcher on sleep in the world or something along those lines. And I have, kind of started thinking about sleep and recovery and things like that. I have a Whoop band and sleep matters to me. So I thought it'd be interesting. And at one point they were talking about how while you're asleep and you're dreaming, your brain is essentially reprocessing all of the things that were input into it over the course of a day. And you're not like, I guess memorizing is the best word I can use to describe it. But like, let's say you were trying to learn the line in a chorus of a song. Your brain is running that line subconsciously through your head while you are asleep. And you can learn skills while you're asleep. The same thing happens through like visualization. And if you don't even touch a club or move your body in any way, shape, or form, but let's say you watch the video of me doing it and you visualize yourself doing that. They did a study and they found that you can accomplish 50% of the skill learning for certain skills just by thinking about it for a movement. So they had people, the study was like 2 groups of people learning to play the keyboard. They had one group physically practice the keyboard and the other group was only allowed to think of it. And the learning that was done was 50% on the just think about it and just visual about it side as the people who are physically practicing it. And I don't know if that same percentage applies to golf, but I know some percentage applies to golf. So if at the very least you sort of wander off with your thoughts during a work conference call and you start thinking about your golf swing, think about it correctly. It actually does you some good.
Hey, folks, you heard it here. Ryan Hager said you don't have to go and practice very much. Clearly. Dude, this is brilliant stuff. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time so much. The folks can see all these videos. I've got them on my phone. You sent them to me, but they're straight off your Instagram site. Please share the handle with the people so they can find you.
Yeah, thanks. It's Ryan Hager, Hager _ PGA.
Mm-hmm.
And then my website's ryanhagergolf.com.
All right. And you're teaching golf at Plainfield. If anyone is in the New Jersey area, wonderful golf course, that place.
Yeah. And if you're not, I do online lessons on the Skillest app. So you can find me from anywhere in the world.
All right, mate. Listen, great stuff. Appreciate your time. Keep up the awesome work. I love what you're doing.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.